Hello, everybody, and welcome back to yet another cracking installment of the Matt Brown Show. This is the Built in California series, looking rather fresh. Season 2, if you've been following on YouTube. If you haven't, where have you been? You've got missing out on some incredible talent. With me on the line is another individual that's a true visionary, not from the US, but definitely from California. He's Scottish, which you're about to hear the amazing accents of the Scots. His name is Stephen Webster. He is the founder and CEO of Asensei. Welcome to the show, dude.
Thanks very much, Matt. I'll speak English or I'll speak Scottish. It's just really fast English. It's
Yeah.
it's got to listen faster.
So, funny backstory. You're from Greenock, or your family is from Greenock, and my grandfather built ships during the Second World War, I think, or first, Second World War, in Greenock too. So that's a weird coinky dink.
Yeah, actually, I grew up on the east coast of Scotland, but some of my family moved to Greenock. Yeah, so
Yeah,
I
that's
spent about
crazy. Well,
spent about
the
small
Scots
world.
the Scots are awesome, man. So, and we're about to find out how awesome the Scots are in the world of startups. Mate, you've got an incredible background. You built and sold companies before. You're definitely on another winner here with Asensei. I've had the privilege of getting to know you and a bit about the backstory. So why don't you kick us off and fill in our viewers and audience around the world about like who you are, your background, and maybe just paint a picture of the origin story to Asensei.
Sure. I mean, in some regards, I think of Asensei as it's kind of like everything that was separate suddenly, is intertwining together. It's kind of three things really. I think technology, entrepreneurship, and sport coaching. So from a technology perspective, I mean, I grew up in Scotland. I grew up in a moderate-sized town in the east coast of Scotland. But I was that kid. I was like first in the town to have a computer, the Dragon 32 or the TRS 80 for the Americans. I was that kid that was always into technology. I mean, it's not a job for me; it's a hobby for me. I just really enjoy kind of programming and computers and electronics. And so I studied computer science and electronics at University of Edinburgh. I became a chip designer. I wasn't the best chip designer, so I became a software engineer. And I got to see the whole kind of .com and participate in the whole .com in kind of 99, 2000, mainly in like online banking and online e-commerce and stuff like that. So that's the technology. Um, I've always loved sport. As a kid, I played a ton of different sports. But the activity that I guess I was most into and I was best at was martial arts. I was getting picked on at school, and my mum and dad took me to a judo class, and so I went from judo to jiu-jitsu. And then when I went to university, I wanted to compete, for the university in a sport. And the jiu-jitsu that I studied was non-competitive, so I was like, I'm going to learn karate, and I'll kind of compete in karate competitions. And so I ended up captaining the club at Edinburgh University, and then ended up coaching the club at Edinburgh University, where I developed a real passion for sport coaching and the difference in the impact you can have on people when you take them from I never knew I could do this to white belt to black belt. And then the third kind of leg, if you like, of the stool is I was an accidental entrepreneur. I kind of got laid off 3 or 4 times within a year, round about kind of 2001 when one of the times that things crashed. And so I started doing software contracts rather than working for a company. I was just picking up contract work. I got a contract that was kind of too big for me, so I dragged someone into it to help me out. We started a company, and like 4 years later, we sold that company to Adobe, and we ended up inside of Adobe, where I got to help build the worldwide consulting organization. So that's kind of been my three threads. And fast forward through a career at Adobe and a career at Microsoft, I just kind of felt like the future I've always wanted is like imminent. The problem I wanted to solve is, can physical exercise and sport and fitness be something that you can deliver digitally at scale, but with the same kind of personalization of having a coach in the room? And I just had this moment that anyone that started a company on the back of an idea has kind of felt this anxiety of, as soon as you've had the idea, no matter how far forward that idea feels, your immediate and next feeling is like, if I don't do this now, someone else is going to do it. And so back in 2014, I quit a really good job at Microsoft and kind of put the band together for Asensei, and here we are. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of sense of the journey.
No, it does. No sense intended. You know what I mean? But it's interesting, like your backstory and how you talk about this idea of like the accidental sort of entrepreneur thing. It's quite interesting, right? Like I think it happens more often than people I think give it credit for.
Right.
And it's another way, like for me also, kind of like an accidental entrepreneur purely because I was unemployable. So
I think I said the same thing. Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's like I had a shelf life, of like 6 months, and then I was like,
I think one of the things that's really interesting is like entrepreneurs almost become like a job description, right? You ask someone at Stanford, like, what do you want to be when you graduate? It's like, I want to be an entrepreneur. I'm like, well, what do you mean you want to be an entrepreneur? Yeah, I sometimes call it the entrepreneur, right? And I stole that phrase from someone else. I don't know who, but the idea of like, I like the idea of being my own boss. I like the idea of, I don't report to anyone, and and so there's a myth and there's a cult around what it might be like to be an entrepreneur. And people will kind of jump from idea to idea. And I think that the challenge there is that you don't have this deep burning thing inside your soul that you have to will this future into existence, and you have to kind of shape it in your image. And as an accidental entrepreneur, certainly with Asensei, I just have such a deep care about the problem being solved. And I almost don't want to bestow the responsibility of solving that problem onto someone else, because I want to make sure it gets done right. I have a strong point of view on what this like tiny corner of the future needs to look like and needs to be like. And so I need to steward it. And being an entrepreneur, as you know, and as all your guests will share as well, it's hard. I mean, it's this idea that you're your own boss, that's not necessarily a good thing. Yeah, I really think about it's not so much that you're the accidental entrepreneur, but that you've found something that you just have so much conviction around that the courage comes next, and you just kind of have to do it.
Yeah, and it's also fascinating for me listening to you speak, Steve, in the sense of like,
If you don't understand a word I'm saying, or
yeah, it's amazing I can actually understand you. But it's like people start businesses oftentimes because something sucked for them,
right,
and it was like, this is exactly what you're saying. Like, this was a thing that I've struggled with, and I care deeply about this thing, so much so that I need to be the steward of this solution to this problem. And another fantastic founder, Billy Brush, he's sitting in Palo Alto, probably just down the neck of the woods. In fact, you and him, by the way, should actually connect, because he's doing something in youth sports, and and we'll get into what you guys are doing. He's also, he's got Scott Sandell is his investor, 22 IPOs behind him, great team network. Like, I don't know. And I actually mentioned you to Billy, so I must actually execute on that now.
But I think that's good. Yeah.
You're in the same area doing complementary things, I think. Right. Yeah, so you should grab a coffee or what have you. But anyway, we're digressing here. So, going back to this thing around, like, where these Genesis ideas come from. Like, there was another founder, she's based out in New York, but her name's Mickey Agrawal. So she used to go for like a number 2, and she was like, this is fucking unhealthy and disgusting. And so she created $100 million bidet business.
No way.
Legit, dude. Like, cleaning people's asses and creating a whole brand around this thing, and super smart, like amazing. And it's not the first time she's done it. And she has this 2-step process, which is kind of like, well, does this suck for me? And if you can find something that sucks for you, the next question is, does this suck for a lot of other people? Because if you can connect those two things and you go, well, you're really building the solution for yourself, and then you create the value and all that kind of stuff by solving it many times for many other people who also suffer from the same issue.
Yeah, no, you remind me of something. So something the more we get to know each other, you'll see it's not just like my life that's woven. My anecdotes are woven between sport and business and tech. And so, as a coach, as a karate coach, a couple of my colleagues that I coached with, one of whom is my CTO, Bill. We have an expression as coaches where we say a good coach has to have the eyes. And what do we mean by the eyes? And the eyes is, you and I, could go and train with, a martial arts instructor. We could go for a weekend to a seminar. and we could both be looking at the same instructor doing the same thing, and you've got the eyes, and you see the nuance, and you see them doing something that everyone else in the room is just missing. They're not equipped to see what you're seeing. They don't have the foundation of knowledge that you have. And those are the insights that you look for as a coach. That's how you become a really good coach of other people, is being able to kind of like look with a fresh set of eyes on a foundation of understanding. When I sold my company to Adobe, and I had the privilege, first of all, building the technology team inside Adobe Consulting, but I then subsequently inherited the user experience design team. I got this, crash course in the importance of design and design thinking, and everybody knows about design and design thinking now. But it was very unconventional that design and software engineering were two things that came together back in like 2005, 2006. And what I love about design thinking is exactly what you've just described. It's the ability to, the first 4 or 5 weeks we would spend with a client, we would just be anthropologists. We would walk into a room or walk into a call center or be on the factory floor at Nike or on the trading floor at Morgan Stanley, and we'd learn the job and we'd start. I remember, I'll give you a great anecdote actually. We built Morgan Stanley's trading platform, and one day a guy was moving his desk, and he was like really senior, and he was moving his desk, but he was moving his desk closer to the bathroom door. And we're like, why are you getting promoted closer to the stinky bathroom door, like the bad seat on the airline? And it was basically, the more assets you've got under management, the more risk you have being away from your desk, the closer you can get to the bathroom and back again, the better you can perform, right? And it's like, and those would be the little insights that you'd be like, how does that become a capability in the product that we're building? Like, what's the problem that exists that we've just uncovered that we need to solve? So I completely agree. But, my point being, like, having the eyes and design thinking, it's a skill you can train. People often think about, I'm just not creative. And that's bullshit. Like, we're all creative if we understand the creative process and we understand how to play our part in that process. So yeah, big advocate of design and design thinking and anthropology.
Exactly. And while you were at Adobe doing all that design thinking and all that kind of stuff, we also have mutual acquaintances. So Jeffrey Moore wrote the book Crossing the Chasm.
Yeah.
It never leaves my desk.
Yeah, with clip notes. No, I mean, that was amazing. So while I was at Adobe, one of the execs at the time, he's now at Oracle, Rob Tarkoff, Rob brought Jeffrey into Adobe with the big question that Jeff's always asked to solve is like, where's the next billion-dollar business for us? And as you know from the book Crossing the Chasm, one of the things I love about Jeff is he's a frameworks guy. Everything's a framework, everything's a process. He's got his 9-step framework for crossing the chasm. And I got to be on the team. I got to be on the team of about maybe 10 or 12 of us who literally over the course of, I can't remember, a year, Jeff would come in the office and run workshops with us and help us find what became the Adobe Marketing Cloud, actually. And so I got to do the chasm crossing playbook with Jeff. I remember the first time I met Jeff, and he'd been told to meet me because I was doing this kind of crazy design thinking consulting thing. And so Jeff and his colleague who became my boss at Microsoft, Rick Chavez, Jeff and Rick and I, we had a lot of fun kind of figuring out what's the role of design and design thinking in the chasm crossing playbook. Like, when does some of the techniques that you would use in the design process feed into, I mean, I'm sure you know the process up by heart, but your target market, your target customer, what's the compelling reason for the customer to buy? That's a design opportunity. So yeah, I got to run the drill with Jeff at Adobe. He then went to Microsoft. His colleague Rick went to Microsoft, and I went to work for Rick at Microsoft, and we did it all again inside the Microsoft Office team. So yeah, it was fun. It was fun.
Yeah, cool. Are we ever going to get to Asensei? I'm not quite sure. I feel like I could
well,
just.
We've done bidets and toilets, so
yeah, I mean, we shooting the breeze here, dude. You know what I mean? But let's do Asensei now. So what is the problem from your perspective that you guys are solving? I mean, is it simply a case of like remote coaching? Is it the fact that people aren't training the right way? What's the issue?
Listen, we've got millions of people now every day doing millions of workouts on millions of screens. So they're watching these workouts on screens, but nobody's watching them. So nobody's making sure when you're doing your workout, are you practicing safely? Are you practicing correctly? Is the content, is the workout that you're following commensurate with your skill? Because if it's too easy, you'll be bored and you'll quit. And if it's too hard, you'll get frustrated and you'll quit. So, in sport coaching, we're always looking to create the conditions for flow, where challenge and skill are sort of like just in this little constant, close race with each other. And so how do you solve for that problem? I think when industries move online, I think about e-commerce, I think about banking, I think about travel. Stage one of digital disruption is we're just attracted by the reach. If this was online, like we could reach everybody, it doesn't matter where they are. We then quickly follow that with, once we've got the reach, how do I then personalize the experience? How do you and I go to the world's biggest bookstore, but the books you see are different to the books that I see based on who you are and what you're reading? Netflix, like you and I's Netflix pages will probably look completely different because of the programs that we watch. But in fitness and in sport and in coaching, personalization means something different, right? Like if you were to walk into my karate class and I was going to teach you karate, you might walk in as a complete beginner day one next to another complete beginner day one, but you've got different bodies, you've got different injuries, you move differently. You've played another sport before that's kind of analogous. You move quite well. Like, how did you learn to move like that? Oh, I used to be a dancer, or I'm an Olympic rower. It's like, oh, interesting. I can kind of work with that. And so for us, the problem we had to solve for fitness and health coaching to go digital and go at scale is we need to be able to do what a coach does. We need to be able to observe somebody as they practice and observe them. It's almost like I rehearse this. Observe them with the eyes. I need to have the eyes. I'm not just like seeing it as like some stream of raw data, but I have a body of knowledge about the thing that person is doing. So I can look at you doing, if I watch you doing, since I've coached karate so much, I'll watch you throw a kick or throw a punch and be like, I know exactly what to teach you next based on where you are and what I know about the art. This is what we're going to work on next. And so that's kind of the problem that we've set out to solve. We call it human movement recognition. Like, in the same way that we taught machines to understand speech, and then once they could understand speech, we could build solutions that are driven by speech recognition. Now we're solving human movement recognition, and that allows us to kind of, deliver connected fitness or connected health experiences in a safe, correct, challenging way. It's super exciting.
It is. Very curious though. How I mean, in your research and just experience, playing in the space, like how big is this problem? I mean, I think it's quite easy to go, well, the healthcare industry is worth X. Do you have any insight? I mean, obviously we can do like the rationale and go, oh, well, there's, the 300 million people in the US, half of them do, some kind of remote, exercise through Peloton or whatever the case is. Like what would you say, or how would you quantify like the size of this issue or this problem that you're solving?
Untapped and uncapped. I'll kind of start there and I'll work back. In fact, one of the very first, not to keep name dropping Jeff, who I haven't spoken to for a while, but one of the first meetings I had when I decided to start Asensei was I took Jeff for breakfast. His favorite breakfast, his EA told me, like, take him for breakfast and he'll take your meeting. So there's a tip for everyone to get a meeting with Jeff Moore. But Jeff said to me, in terms of your target market, he's like, pick on someone your own size. And pick a market that's big enough to lead, but material enough to matter. So that's kind of the framework I work within, right? So if I just kind of share with you our trajectory, especially given the COVID pandemic and how much that impacted the work at home, connected fitness, everyone's buying rowing machines and bikes and treadmills and strength training machines and mirrors. So we saw that as what Jeff would call the beachhead market, the tip of the spear market. It's a $6 billion market growing 33%, compound annual growth. So it's a big market. We could build a venture scale business just in connected fitness. But that $6 billion market is just the lead bowling pin on a $60 billion virtual fitness market. So that's a market that includes, the digital apps that you might, your Nike Training Club or your Volt Athletics or your Freeletics, your Active. So that's that's the kind of the bigger sports opportunity. We see it as an omni-channel opportunity. Most categories that digitally transform. They swing to digital and then they swing back to equilibrium again, and there's new problems to solve. How can I buy something online but return it in store? How do you seamless customer experience? And so now if you look at the gym and the fitness market, which is another $100 billion market, and then I look at the adjacent markets that we can't help but being pulled into, and we're doing a lot of work in physical therapy, MSK injuries, and we're also engaged now in what we call the industrial athlete. 80% of the global workforce doesn't have a desk and works in a physically demanding job, and they need prehabilitation to not get injured and rehabilitation when they're injured. So that's 2.7 billion people. So the way I look at it is, if I've got a VC deck, I have to be able to answer the question so I can kind of tell that story of it's huge. But huge puts people off as much as small does, unless you can show the kind of the stairway to heaven that you're going to follow. So we're only going after the $6 billion connected fitness market right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, geez, good for you. I think you define yourself by saying no more than what you do by saying yes. And it's a very important thing that I'm hearing from you, Stephen, in that, like, you could absolutely go in any of those two those two segments, let's say, but you chose not to.
Right.
And you were like, no, fuck that, I'm going here. And you said, this is our North Star. Walk us through your thought process around that, because like all the great growth, all the scale that like I've achieved it has literally, dude, like I can't even, like, it's a truism from my experience, right? In that if you try and be for everyone, you're invisible. But the moment you go, we're actually not for you, dude. We're like, unless you have this problem, like, we're not interested, right? We only solve this thing. And the moment that you decide to do that, because decisions are your ultimate power, everything becomes clearer. Like the way you go to market, what product you should build, what you should charge, what partnerships you need, who your investors should be, right? Like a lot of things become clear when, literally the day before they weren't clear. And it's a very powerful insight. And I'd love you to share, Stephen, what was your thought process? Like, there's a lot of, how did you decide that, like, we're going to go there as a start?
Yeah, that's a good question. Again, I'm going to twine my worlds together. So Michael Goff, we used to be the VP of design, the head of design at Adobe. I think this is even before I worked for Adobe. I remember seeing him on stage in LA, actually in Anaheim. And he was espousing the principles of great experience design. And he used the line, this is like back in 2004, and I still use it pretty much every week. When everything's equal, nothing's important. And it was the idea that in design, you have to be very intentional about, like, what does your user want to accomplish here? And you kind of like amplify that part of the experience, and everything else kind of drops back. And just being, to your point, it talks to the importance of intentionality and really kind of having an understanding of where you are and where you're going next. And, I take that design principle into a lot of other spheres, if you like. So with Asensei, for instance, we decided, a big decision we had to make first was health or fitness, or sport or fitness, or and frankly, it came down to physical therapy or sport and sport coaching, because it just seemed like such a no-brainer problem for us to solve in physical therapy. But the problem with physical therapy was, it's really, if you've ever sold into healthcare, you'll not bet your farm back home on building a business selling into healthcare. It's easier to enter another market first, and then once you've got profit and revenue, or revenue and profit, you can move into healthcare. So I think the first answer to your question is like history leaves clues. And if you've sold into healthcare before, and it's hard, and it's a long sales cycle, and that the person that's getting the benefit is not the person that's paying for it, it's a complex payment, especially in the US. So that took us into sport. But then we had the challenge of, we need to show the market what this future looks like. We need to kind of, people have never experienced what we were calling connected coaching. They've never experienced it. They don't know what it's like. It's like the iPod comes out. I've never had 1,000 songs in my pocket. Why would I want that? A touch screen. I'm fine with buttons. And so we had to pick a sport and this was my conversation with Jeff actually, but we had to pick a sport that we would start with. And so I literally went full on Boston Consulting, 2x2 kind of matrix, the Boston matrix. And the way we thought about it is our x-axis was, let me get this right. The x-axis was like, you know, the how well did our technology solve a problem in that sport? Like how applicable did we think it was? So the more something was to the right, we're like, Asensei would be brilliant for that. And then the y-axis was difficulty, like how and difficulty might be technical difficulty, it might be regulatory difficulty. And so we kind of plotted out like 20 or 30 sports. I've still got the slide somewhere. We plotted out all the sports. And then to Jeff's, find a market that's big enough to lead, small enough to matter, with clear adjacencies. Where if you get that, you know, in his book, Crossing the Chasm, he talks about the bowling pin. If you slam that first bowling pin hard enough, eventually when it topples, it'll get a few others starting to shake as well. And those are the next markets. So using that matrix, we picked indoor rowing. And if you look at indoor rowing now, it's like one of the fastest growing segments online, but every VC was like, rowing, like, why are you doing rowing? It's a tiny sport. Now it's like, it's hydro, it's peloton, it's concept 2, it's water rower. But we picked indoor rowing because we kind of felt like we could build a product that everybody in the rowing industry would know it was us, and we've accomplished that. And we knew that rowers participated in lots of other sports, strength training, mobility training, CrossFit, and yoga in particular. And we knew that those were good markets for us to move into next. So yeah, we just, you know, listen, I think the too long didn't read answer to the question is have a framework, you know, and be intentional about your framework so that you're not, it might look like you're acting off of gut, but you've actually got like a, you know, you can have a rational decision, a rational discussion about, does this fit or does this not fit?
Mm-hmm.
That's your
Yeah,
question?
it does. Or a fallback, you know, it's
Right.
like it's insurance. Like, how did you get there? I mean, I think the thing that would cause me anxiety is making that choice and then, you know, 3 months later going, oh shit, this isn't the right thing. How the fuck did we get there?
Right.
You know, and now it's like, oh snap, like, oh, there it is, there's the
Right.
like that. You know what I mean? Like, at least it's a way for you to repeat or to avoid repeating the same mistakes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'd love to talk to you about like this connected coaching experience, right? Because that's ultimately what the
Yeah.
outcome is. So I've never had a connected coaching experience. I
Right.
know a lot of our audience around the world also won't know what that feels like. So what I'd love to do with you, Stephen, and this is an example that you shared with me, is like, let's take golf, right? So you're a golfer. You walk into a Nike store, you buy a Nike golf shirt as an example.
Yeah.
What happens from there? Like, paint a picture of like a connected coaching experience in that context. Like, what do you see happening as a consequence?
Yeah, I'm not going to use golf as an example if you'll allow me.
No. It's your show, dude.
I'm probably worth explaining just a little bit first for people that are listening. So the first stage in our process is motion capture. Like, I have to get a picture of your skeleton in real time so that, you know, the machine can see your skeleton moving. And then once the machine can see your skeleton moving, you're like, he's doing a deadlift. I recognize that. I know a lot about deadlifts. I know that you should hinge at the hips. I know that your knee should push out slightly. I know that you shouldn't go too far over the toes. I know the torso should be up. All this stuff I know about deadlifts. What mistake is Matt making in that deadlift that's most important for me to teach next? And how do I teach that? Do I have a drill to teach that? Or do I have a coaching cue that I use? So that's kind of what's going on inside the machine. And there's two ways we can motion capture. There's two ways that Asensei motion captures. One is with what we call connected apparel. So we can put sensors inside existing brands' clothing. And it's like a Hollywood, you know, if you've ever seen Andy Serkis, you know, making, you know, Lord of the Rings or Gollum, it's pretty similar technology, but consumerized for your regular sportswear, where you just pull on a shirt, you pull on a pair of pants, and your phone is getting a real-time skeleton that is that's you moving, and that's the data that we're feeding to the Asensei engine. The other alternative approach we have is computer vision. So just with an ordinary camera on your smartphone or your laptop or your smart TV or your Peloton bike, that camera we can extract a 3D picture of your skeleton from that camera, and we can feed that into our coaching engine. So that's a little bit of background on the technology. So now let's get away from that commoditized part. Let's talk about the cool stuff. So what's the day in the life of a consumer? So I want you to imagine, let me use rowing as an example, because I've spent so much time in rowing. You buy a new rowing machine. You've never rowed before. You're excited by the idea. You saw the ad on television. You hear that rowing's like 86% of your body and an efficient workout, and you're into it. But then you sit down on the rowing machine. Like, how do I do this? Now, today, you might watch a video of someone else rowing. If I know one thing as a karate instructor, me standing in front of you doing something and then saying, okay, now it's your turn, you're a legend in your mind and you think you're doing exactly what I just showed you, but you've got the wrong leg forward, or you're moving incorrectly, the sequence is incorrect. So as a coach, what I would do in that situation, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to play a rowing coach now. So I'd be like, okay, Matt, slide all the way to the back, pull the handle to your chest, just there, tuck your elbows in for me, lean back just a little bit, push your knees down flat, squeeze your, okay, do you feel that? That's the finish position. Now, let your arms go away. No, don't bend your legs, Matt. No, let your arms go away. And once your hands pass your knees, now you can bend your so I'll coach you piece by piece through the movement. So that's the connected coaching experience. All of a sudden, the machine can see your posture. The machine knows what position you're in. So the machine, the computer, the voice in your ear of a rowing coach will say all the things I've just said. It would be like, so we call that guided learning or onboarding. This is one example of connected coaching where we can teach you a new movement and get you learning yoga poses or learning to swing a kettlebell or learning to row. But then imagine now you're in the middle of a workout. So you're doing a kind of strength training workout. You've got your kettlebell, your dumbbells, your resistance bands. As you're doing that workout, we can count your reps. We can log them for you. You're not typing them in. We can count them. We can log them for you while you're warming up. So while you're doing your warm up, we're watching you warm up, and we're not telling you this, but we're doing what a coach does. I'm like, Matt's hamstrings look a little tight today, particularly on the right side. And I was thinking about doing this exercise later, but that's going to destroy his hamstring or he's going to injure himself. So when I get there, I'm going to substitute that exercise for something else. Or maybe in the warm-up, I'll recognize, that your hamstring seems to, and we'll hang out there for a bit. We'll do another stretch. We'll substitute a stretch. So Asensei is powering those kind of experiences. And then the last thing I'll share is just like, as you're working out, if I know you know something, like if we've had this conversation before, in sport coaching terms would say that you're consciously competent, you can do it if you think about it, then I can give you real-time cues and real-time reminders. Now, you've never been in my karate class before, so when I say Death Star, you have no idea what that means. But if you've been in one of my karate classes, it's reminding you where to put your hand vis-a-vis your shoulders and your hips on a particular punch. And so that ability to deliver real-time cues, because I can observe your form and give you that cue that you need to hear in that moment to correct your posture, that's something we can deliver. So listen, I could talk for hours about the 20 or 30 experiences we can deliver, but the bottom line is, it's like having a personal trainer standing beside you, tailoring and personalizing the delivery and the content of that class based on how well you're doing what you should be doing. Does that make sense?
It does. Makes perfect sense. And I'm going to stick with golf. So I go to the Nike store, buy this shirt. You're saying
not going to make you a better golfer.
Okay, I know, dude. Okay, right. But say, no, buy this Nike shirt. There's a sensor in it. It's the same as you picking up my movement, right? And then I would connect my app to this connected coaching thing. And then in theory, what I would also hear is like Tiger Woods' voice.
100%. Yeah. And listen, you just took a slide from my VC pitch of 6 or 7 years ago. And I'm literally going to pull a string on my back and play the slide. But yeah, that's what I would tell people is like, I live in a future where you'll walk into Nike Town, you'll buy a shirt and pants, you'll pull them on, and you'll have the voice of Tiger Woods in your ear telling you to pause a little longer at the top of the swing, or telling you to, whatever that coaching is. You've probably seen a lot of these technologies around like deep fakes, how I can get a recording of 5 minutes of your voice and then I can make you say things you've never said with text to speech. That's part of the That's part of the platform we're developing, is how do we partner with some of these companies to actually put the voices of real athletes, but they're not saying pre-recorded sound bites to you. They're actually speaking to Matt Brown and giving them
Yeah.
coaching.
Yeah, exactly. It's such an interesting space, right? Because like I do a lot of like YouTube calisthenics workouts, like HIIT workouts and
Right,
stuff like that. And you're hitting on a fair point, right? Like there's no one making sure you're not going to actually injure yourself.
right. No, that's exactly the problem. And also, like, which one do you do? And do you get stuck doing the same one because it's familiar? But when is it time for you to progress? Another thing that we do a good job of for our customers. And listen, it's also worth noting we're an ingredient technology, so we're not. You're not downloading the Asensei product to get this coaching. Uh, we're like Dolby sound on your television. Okay, we want to be that badge on the box that you know that if you buy that product. In fact, there's a product coming to market in the coming weeks. Climber, they're a connected climbing machine, and they're releasing their V2 of the product. And Asensei will be powering the form tracking on and off the Climber for the V2 of their product. And I just saw a review actually where the reviewer kind of talked about all the new features and then said, but the thing I am most excited about the new Climber machine is the form tracking powered by this company called Asensei. And that was a KPI for us. Like one day, people will say they bought the product because it had Asensei inside it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a good moment for us.
Yeah, but it's also a very interesting scale strategy, isn't it? I mean, I think oftentimes, like, there's a few startup founders I've had on the show who um, are like, how's this for an amazing startup, right? His name's Keith Kirkland, and he's based out in New York, African American dude, and he's created it's called haptics. I don't know if you know what it is. You
Yeah,
probably
yeah,
do.
yeah, yeah,
So it's like the ability. It's like I don't know. I'm going to bastardize this, but basically what the product does is, let's just say you're visually impaired or you're blind and you want to go from A to B. Typically, what happens is you only go to like one or two places because that's all you can confident
right,
enough to do. So with he's developed a band that essentially is touch based navigation, right? And it's like and he's also, and I said to him, dude, like you've developed this thing called the Wayband, but really you're a technology, right? That you should be opening up, just like Sensei is, to other, developers, designers, things like this, so that you start to become like this enabling protocol
right.
to, I mean, because there's just so many ecosystems, right? There's Nike, Adidas, blah blah
No,
blah,
you're totally
Apple.
right. It's a really, a big challenge being a founder sometimes is, do you have the market savviness? Have you ever taken a product to market? Like you have to design a go-to-market again, and crossing the chasm. It's one of the 9 steps is pricing and go-to-market. Um, and B2C sounds great because you own all the economics, but do you know how expensive it is to acquire a customer, keep a customer? And B2B sounds really exciting because, like, we'll be in every television or we'll be in every pair of headphones. But do you understand the margins on those products and how little you have to sell your license your product for to be an ingredient, and how long it'll take you to get to? So, there's really hard decisions to be made around go to market. But it's funny, when I was with Microsoft, one of the guys on my team, he actually did a huge exploration of exactly this haptic navigation, but he had it placed behind the ear. And it was just buzzing behind the ear to kind of tell you to go left, go right, go forward,
Yeah.
so that it could be an ingredient in a headset. It could be part of a wearable headset.
Mm-hmm.
Very
Yeah,
cool.
it is cool. There's another one named Shira, also based in Cali, and she's developed like underwater streaming technology for swimmers
I
using
know it. Yeah,
bone conducting technology
yeah,
and stuff. Like, and it's like the same thing. It's like when you build the product, it's like, well, what are the other use cases that the technology can be used for?
right,
Do you know what I mean? Because then it's like, oh, because you touched on up front, like Jeffrey's idea, right? Like it's this adjacent market.
right,
Like, well,
right,
what's the adjacent use case for the core current use of your technology? Because if you can connect that, and then it's like it opens up an entirely new
right,
like ability to cross that chasm, right?
right. And it doesn't have to be either or either. I mean, for Ascensi, we went B2C. Partly it was for customer learning, but partly it was for revenue until we could get the air under the wings of the B2B business. So, like, we still have a lot of people rowing every day with an app powered by Ascensi. Um, and we'll continue to support that app, but it's allowed us to get the B2B business up off the ground.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, so mate, you're definitely a visionary, right? And I love asking this question to visionaries. Obviously, you've come a long way. What do you hope uh, is like the end outcome, from your perspective? Like you are where you are, but you're working towards something long term. Um, what is that vision? Like, what do you hope to create in the world? What difference do you hope to make?
No, I mean, it's a powerful question because it can elicit powerful answers, right? I definitely had my "Do you want to make sugared water for the rest of your life" moment when I was with Adobe. And listen, I some of my fondest memories, my favorite part of my career was working at Adobe. So I am not about to trash the company, but the company did take a big turn into the world of digital marketing, which felt to me like a big departure from the importance of creativity and design. Now we were saying like, well, you just let a machine optimize and test creative and content, and that whole world of ad tech and marketing tech, it suddenly felt very soulless to me, and it felt like the soul had been sucked away from the company. Now they're back, and like the creativity coming out of Adobe is phenomenal. But for me, it was a forcing function for like, what am I doing? And I decided, you know, I had one particular, I don't think I've ever told anyone this actually, but I had one particular, I did a customer briefing at Adobe to United Healthcare, to the innovation group at United Healthcare. And it left a big impression on me because I was like, oh my gosh, the stuff these guys are working on, like it's impacting lives. The innovation that comes out of this saves lives. And so I kind of had this moment of like, how can I do something like that? But I'm not a doctor. I don't work in. And then I kind of meandering story here. But then I by chance happened to meet a couple of my former karate students in New York. I was in New York randomly, put a message out on Facebook. I'm in New York if anyone's around, because universities, people are all over the place. And I caught up with two of my students from Scotland who happened to be in New York, and they both told the same story about how impactful learning karate had been at university. One of them's gone on to be a phenomenal actor and been in a bunch of movies with Jackie Chan and Matt Damon. The other's a senior journalist at the BBC now. But they're both sitting there telling me like what I learned on the mat, being in the club, being in a team, learning a sport, it changed my life. And I went on to hear that story from so many other students that like learning sport and unlocking my athletic potential made me realize my greater kind of human potential. And that's when I realized like I can scale that. I can't invent a medical device. I don't know enough about that stuff. But I can scale that. I can scale access to world-class coaching, just helping people unlock their athletic potential. So that's what we want to accomplish. We want to have Powered by Asensei on every TV, on every connected fitness product, on every digital app. I want your physical therapy to be powered by Asensei. I want your rehab from surgery to be powered by Asensei. And I want you to learn sport powered by Asensei. And if unlocking a little bit of your athletic potential unlocks your greater potential, that's super rewarding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. And so we're gonna come back to that. So I want to firstly have a bit of fun with you, Stephen. So don't worry, you're in safe hands here. But I'm going to give you the keys to the Matt Brown Show time machine, right? And like doing what you've done is like it's really really hard, man. Like it's like the idea is okay, well, it's not simple at all. It's actually really really hard. And so inevitably you've learned a lot about yourself. You've overcome a lot of challenges. You've achieved a lot, not only in terms of like building the team, building the technology, getting investors, all this. You've achieved a hell of a lot. But if you were to go back to yourself, on day one and give yourself, Stephen, on day one, advice about building a sensei, what would that piece of advice be?
I wouldn't give myself any advice. I would tell myself to trust the process, keep conviction, and trust the process, because all the wrong turns, all the left turns, all the challenges, all the constraints, all the serendipity, you shouldn't need to know it's coming. I mean, of course, with the benefit of hindsight, which you can never offer anybody hindsight, with the benefit of hindsight, you might just say, just don't work with this team, or don't work with that person, or don't invest in that project, or don't spend money on that video. It'll be a waste of money. But you're sweating the detail. I think the bigger pictures of again, I'm all full of sound bites today, but I love the expression, never mistake a clear line of sight for a short distance. And I think if you're starting a company, and especially if you're starting a company and never been done before, that requires invention of technology and creation of categories and markets, don't mistake your clear vision and your clear line of sight of that vision for a short distance. It is, there's that expression, it's a marathon, not a sprint. That's not true. It's 26 miles of 26 sprints. You just never stop. You never stop sprinting, but the distance is long. And so I hope I'm giving a different answer to others have given. I don't want to be like, there was one epiphany that if you just do this, you'll be successful. We're the product of 1,000 little decisions and serendipity and people that have kind of joined us along our journey. But the thing that we've never lost is conviction for the problem that we're solving, and flexibility around how we solve the problem. We were, I guess, if I was going to give myself some pithy advice, it's like, fall in love with the problem more than you fall in love with your first solution to the problem. Like, be in love with the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that, by the way, is probably like the best truism ever. Like, I think the thing I have personally struggled with as a founder, 14-time founder, over the last 25 years, is to trust the process, because the process, especially when you're starting, like the initial, let's just say the first 3 months, like that.
There is no process.
Fuck, dude. Listen, I'll speak frankly. It fucking sucks. It is hard, man. Like, it's the first 3 months, dude, your life is like, you're like, why did I decide to do this? I've got 0 customers, no product. I just have an idea, and you're trying to cobble all this stuff together. And I find, like, having been through that process many times, it's the hardest time to navigate. Like, you really, you have to, like, there is no process, but it's more like you actually have to learn to trust yourself, to be able to overcome this. And you and I were chatting before we went live, like, like I said, I pivoted 9 times. It's the same thing, but pivoted 9 times to try and figure out, like, how to get the customers I care about, which is, startups, founders, entrepreneurs and stuff, and scale-ups, to really understand what I do, And I think when we're trying to do hard things and solve hard science problems like this ability to keep persevering, this ability to keep pushing and pivoting, and to throw the baby out with the bathwater if that's what it takes, right? Because that sometimes is the only option for you.
No, I mean, you're unpacking so much for me. I mean, running through my head are so many topics, but I'm listening in the duration of, I don't want to like play a sob story here, but in the duration of Asensei, in the lifetime of Asensei, I've seen like the loss of my mother, the birth of my son, my wife's been laid off super unfairly twice when I'm like not earning a salary for the first time in 10 years. We've moved house in a pandemic in an immunocompromised family to immediately be like, have a 100,000 acre wildfire in our backyard. I mean, it's just like life has just thrown stuff at us, but that's life. Everyone's got stories like that. We're not more picked on than anybody else. And I think I learned in all of that your business is important, but like life is bigger, right? And so you'll get through the tough stuff. Like if you've got conviction and you've got resilience, and if you've got good people around you who agree with you, but not too much, then, which I do have in my 2 co-founders in particular, we all share the same vision, but we'll not always agree on the best way to get there next. What's the right next step? And so to be able to hold that dialectic, the 2 competing ideas at once, and find a path forward, like those are the skills that you need way more than what programming language can you program in, or what's your TikTok marketing campaign strategy. It's like it's the stuff of resilience and grit. That's kind of what you
Yeah.
need.
So I want to share a quick story, and then I'll ask you a final question as
Yeah,
cognizant
yeah,
of time. So basically, I don't know where this I read about it in my book. I'll send you a copy. But
yeah.
basically, I wrote, it's called 12, it's your inner game. It's like 12 principles for high impact entrepreneurs. And one of these things was about grit and perseverance, right? So, and there was this story, and the story goes like this. So there was this general, he amasses this massive fucking army. He's like, I'm gonna go and invade this land. We're gonna kick some ass. So he puts them all into ships and he crosses the sea. And when he gets there, he says to all of his lieutenants, he's like, listen here, go to the ships and I want you to burn them all.
Right.
And then they're like, why would you do that? Like, what happens if we need to escape? Like, then there's no ships. There's no plan B. And he's like, well, that's the point. There
Right.
is no plan B. It's like the Springbok rugby team, the South African rugby team. It's like we only have one plan in a
Right.
game. It's like
Right.
we're going to go there and we're going to fuck you up. We're going to push you and drill you and hurt you until you literally cannot play a game. And then we're going to kick, and then we're going to win. That's basically it. So there's plan A. There's no plan B. There's only plan A, but better, right? And I wish I had heard that story when I was in my 20s, because it would have given me a lot of grit and
Right.
to recognize. Like, I remember, like, of the 14 startups, and let's just say, like, of the 10 that failed, let's just say, I would say that probably 30% of those came from just the shit got too hard and I was too
Right.
young. I didn't have like the coping skills to deal with the pressure,
Right.
you know.
I don't want to be um, abrasive, but I don't agree with the story, and I'll tell you why.
Ah,
It's
do
a
it.
great story. It's a great story, right? And it would fire me up and it would motivate me. So I love it motivationally. But as someone in charge of a P&L and a steward of venture capital money, and again, I'm going to use my martial arts as an example. Like martial arts, like you'll train defenses against attacks. If somebody grabs you by the collar and pulls you in and throws a right hook, this is what you do, and you always practice that. In most dojo, that's what you practice. Okay. But what's that great Tyson phrase? Like, everyone has a plan until they're smacked in the face, right? And so it was actually my co-founder Bill. I think it was my co-founder Bill kind of coined this phrase of like the oh shit moments, right? And the oh shit moments are, you do what you thought you were going to do, but you thought you were going to block the arm, but it kind of came over the top of your head. So we would be like, well, what would happen if that kick didn't land and I fell forward? Or what would happen if, and then we would work from there. That would be so we'd kind of like rehearse things going wrong so that when things going wrong, it flowed us into something else. And so I think about that in business as well. It's like, and I'll use a very specific example. I had a strong conviction. The boats that I burned on the shore were connected apparel. Computer vision is not good enough yet. The processing power is not there on the phones. The LiDAR cameras, the depth cameras won't be on phones. They'll never get them down to the form factor. And a strong, strong point of view on that. But I was prepared to be wrong. And so immediately, computer vision became a compelling technology. We jumped right on it. So we hadn't really burnt our boats. We'd left a little computer vision dinghy at the back, so we could go out there. So I think, to summarize, like, I think you're right. I love the story. It's like, but it speaks to me more about, like, you've got to have conviction. You can't have doubt. You can't have this, like, I'm not sure, maybe I'll come back tomorrow. But I think it's incumbent on you to kind of be aware of, like, what could go wrong. Have confidence that if it happens, it's not disastrous, but there's a plan for that, or there's a plan for that. So sorry to contradict you, but that's
No, not at all, dude. Like, that's why I do the show, man, is to
yeah.
give people perspective. It's definitely not like the Map Run show, even though it's called that. It's definitely not. But you were right. But it's more about quitting. Like, when things get hard, like you are right. Like, it is about. I mean, like, I also think, because this is a show about like like little quotes and things, but life's always happening for you, not to you. And I think that's what you're saying, right? It's like, well, even like when it's like if you can recognize that something's not working, and then you can make the decision to shift to the left or zig and then
Right.
zag, you know what I mean? To get to a point where, like you
Thousand
said,
percent agree. 1000% agree.
then you, that's the purpose of a startup, isn't it? Is to find that repeatable, profitable business model, and hopefully like you can scale it. So, yeah, so I guess we're kind of agreeing on the same thing. So, Stephen, let's wrap this up, dude. So,
Yeah.
I always ask founders like you, visionaries who are changing the world, and are going to make a huge difference. Is like, why do you do this? Like, what gets you out of bed in the morning?
What would I miss most if I wasn't doing this? Is how I'm going to reframe that question. Um, I'd miss the team. It's as simple as that. I would miss working. I love building teams. I've loved building teams in sport. I love building teams in business. And I would have a lot of sadness about just not getting up in the morning and working with this awesome team of people that have gelled and work really well together, and have a ton of credibility with our customers and with our partners and in the industry. It's like really special when you kind of feel like we've got the core of like a really just good group of talented human beings around which we can build something special. So, that's what gets me up in the morning. I mean, literally, I get up so I can hop on Zoom and catch the team in the UK, or catch people before their day finishes. And so, yeah, that's what keeps me going. I love the problem that we're solving. I love the vision. I love the mission. That's all the big stuff. But like at the end of the day, when I'm tired from the night before, and I'm dragging my ass out of bed, like I love going to work with the people that have bet on us, and bet on what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And it's also why I do the shows, because I get to talk to people like you. And it's like it's amazing. Like it's the same thing for me. Like if I wake up like I woke up this morning, I was like, how many interviews am I doing today? And I'm like, yes, yes, yes. Like I'm like, yeah, I get to spend an hour doing this thing. And then I have like a downtime, like, oh fuck, now I've got to go do this thing.
Right,
You know what I mean? It's like there's some elements of it. So I know what you're saying. It's like it's about being able to do the things you really love, and that's what makes you special and your team special, and kind of what you guys, and the problem that you're solving and the technology that you're building is really special and unique. So super excited to see where you guys are going to go, man. It's a real privilege to have you here, man.
Lots coming out in the months ahead. So we're very excited.
Steve, thanks for being here, buddy.
Awesome. Thanks for hosting.
Cheers, everybody.